Hello again, fellow audiophiles. I am Wave Theory, and I am back today with a fun one. This is the ZMF Verite Open back version. This is a $2,500 starting price open back dynamic driver headphone from ZMF. This is in the pheasant wood variety. This set was loaned to me by Mr. Eric. He has an audio review channel on YouTube as well. If you haven't seen it, I will put a link down to his page below. And check his work out. He does a good job over there. So he sent these to me. I had a couple of conversations via email with Zach at ZMF about these to confirm that these were in fact pheasant wood and just start a professional relationship to use going forward. So I will review these today and we will get into that. So shameless self-promotion and then back with the review. Hey, thanks for watching this video. Please remember to hit that like button, and if you haven't, please subscribe. Also, I have a Patreon set up so that you can help support me on a monthly basis, and I've set up a PayPal donation so that you can help me out in that way too if a monthly subscription does not make sense for you. Links for all of that, including the benefits, in the description below. Please check those out. All right, on with the show. So as stated in the intro, the starting price for the Verite Open is $2,500 US. That for the stock configuration. And then prices vary a little bit from there in terms of whether or not you go with an aluminum or a magnesium chassis, the grill material that you use. You can add additional pairs of pads. You get two pads, the stock Universe pads for the Verite, which I think is what these are. I'm pretty sure that's the case. And then a second pad type of your choice. And if you want any more pads beyond that, then that costs an extra fee. So you're probably going to see this video in early January of 2023. I filmed this in late December of 2022. And so you may be a little bit disappointed that this is not yet the ZMF Caldera. In talking with Zach, Zach says he's willing to send me a Caldera for review, so hopefully that will start soon. But I think it's also important to get the review of the previous flagship of ZMF, the Verite Open, out there. Just so, I mean, the more context that we reviewers have with any given company, I think the more helpful it is in reviewing products from that company, so we can kind of understand not only where does that new thing fit in within a company's line, but where it fits in the overall market as well. I also have, you can see it over here, this is a Verite closed that came in, and this one is in African Blackwood. And I have previously reviewed a Verite closed that was one of the epoxy stabilized versions. And in reflecting back on that one, I'm not quite sure that I had a representative unit because this one sounds a little bit different. So I'm also going to be revisiting the Verite closed here very soon. So stay tuned for that here in the future as well. So yeah, and then of course eventually the Caldera. So then back to the Verite Open here. This was, until the Caldera released, it was a co-flagship at ZMF's line with the Atrium and then the Verite closed, all with that starting price of $2,500 and then price going up from there with various features that you can get. And that is really interesting because I also have a review of the Atrium posted, and I will put a link to that in the description below as well. And I kind of applaud ZMF, I do applaud ZMF for having kind of a co-flagship model there for a while. One of the things about the headphone industry I've noticed is that, for good reasons, because it's complicated to do more, pretty much every manufacturer out there has like one option at a given price point. And that has one tuning. It was tuned to be that way. So like take Hi-Fi-Man, for example. That's a Susvara up there. I am a big fan of Hi-Fi-Man's open back headphones. My personal opinion, they tend to be, or they are just the top dogs right now in terms of both overall technical performance, but also listening enjoyment for these ears at their various price points. And I think their stealth magnet tech is a big deal. When you look at their line though, even though they have a lot of similarities in their tuning at the different price points, like let's look at their big egg-shaped models. like the Edition XS at $500, and then the Ananda Stealth Magnet Edition at $700, and then the Aria Stealth Magnet Edition now at $1,300, and so forth. Like, all of those are similarly tuned, but not identically tuned. Some of them have a little bit more bass presence, some of them have a little bit more mid-range presence, some of them rein in the treble just a little bit more and all of that. They also vary some in detail retrieval. Okay, and like you go upwards in price and you get more detail retrieval. You get more soundstage accuracy and that sort of thing. And again, HiFiMan here is just the example, and I'm going to bring this back to ZMF in a moment, but it is very common. Like Focal is another example, since I've heard a lot of their line. Odyssey, even more so, arguably, an example, where at the different price points, you get different technical prowess in terms of detail retrieval and all of that, but you also get different tunings. And so at a given price point, you're kind of stuck that if you like the detail retrieval and prioritize that, and you like the staging ability and spatial recreation and all of that, at that price point, you're stuck with that tuning, unless you're an EQer, and I'm not really. Okay, so I applaud ZMF for here at the $2,500 price point. You get the Verite Open, the Verite Closed, and the Atrium, all with slightly different tunings to them. And they do. You can look at frequency response graphs, and even by ear, they all have slightly different tunings to them, so you have options. You can get into this ZMF game with just, you know, the beautiful wood cups and the amazing grill work and the excellent craftsmanship and the pride of ownership that comes along with having one of these. You can get into the ZMF game there at basically the same technical level with slightly different stock tunings that you don't have to monkey with EQ and all that for them to be different. Okay, I think that's cool. I applaud them for doing that. I realize it's expensive for companies to develop multiple products at different price points like that, but I wish more of them would do it. Okay, like for example, Focal. Could we have another $3,000 closed back in addition to the Stellia that has a little bit more even tonality through the mids? Okay, that would be great. Some people really like the Stellia. I think its tuning is a little wonky, but its other technical aspects are wonderful. Okay, so could we have that? Possibly. ZMF did something like that. Whether intentionally or not, I think it's cool. All right, moving on from that point. This particular headphone has a 300 ohm rated impedance and an approximately 97 decibel per milliwatt rated sensitivity. So it drives about the same as like the 300 ohm Sennheisers, the HD600, HD650, etc. So if your amp can handle those from a drivability standpoint, you've got a good chance of driving this one well, sufficiently as well. The rated mass, according to ZMF's website of this, is 450 grams, plus or minus about 20, depending on chassis and grill options, and I think probably wood type, since wood densities also change a little bit. This one, on my own little postal scale, was a little bit heavier than those. It's got a mass of 520 grams. I'm not exactly sure why that is. Even so, comfort-wise, these, like, they distribute the weight well. So I could actually wear these things, and they have a nice amount of clamp to them, so they don't really slide around on my head much. I am a physics professor by trade. I think I've said that before, and we just hit an end of the semester here on the month of December. So I had a bunch of grading to do at the end of grading final exams, figuring out final grades, and that sort of thing. So I was wearing these and just listening to music through them while doing that for extended periods of time, and I could move my head around and look around my desk. They stayed on well, and the sound was also very non-fatiguing, and so we'll get to that here in a moment too. But even with that 520 gram, at least I measured weight here, it ended up not being a problem. The weight is distributed well. Now, they are open back. So they do leak sound a lot, but they are muffling my voice a little bit right now. So they are not, completely open. There is a little bit of external sound attenuation, but again, they're going to leak sound because they're open back quite a bit. Okay. Other than that, like the Verite line here is known for having a Beryllium driver. It is a dynamic driver. And Beryllium is like kind of a cheat code, really, because when you're talking about any kind of audio transducer, the driver there, we're always looking for really excellent mass to rigidity ratios. We want a really stiff material that's not going to bend as it's vibrating, but we also want it to be incredibly low mass so that it's easy to control its motion. And beryllium is kind of a cheat code on that, because beryllium is the element with atomic number 3. Okay, which puts it right behind helium as like the least massive element. So hydrogen, helium, beryllium, right? And so it's like the lightest atomic material we have, or element that we have, that is a solid at room temperature. And again, it's atomic number 3, so it's just really low mass. So the beryllium drivers here, low mass, high rigidity. Okay, I'm sure that's why Zach put them in here. For those reasons. Okay. All right, quick correction. Beryllium is atomic number 4, not 3. Good job, physics professor. Okay, but that makes it important because atomic element 3 is lithium, and lithium is an alkali metal, which is highly reactive and has to be stored in special circumstances unless you add more things to it, which will then, of course, increase its mass. So beryllium, let's say, is the least dense and therefore lightest per volume solid element at room temperature, which is safe to use. Let's go with that. All right. Thanks for allowing that quick correction. The other aspects of the build, I mean, it's typical ZMF. You get the mini 4-pin XLR detachable cable here. For this review, Mr. Ehret sent a Norn single-ended cable. I don't remember the model number, or I don't think he knew either, to use this for these. And then I also used my Forza hybrid HPC wire, hybrid wire HPC. There it is. Okay, a cable that has a balanced XLR termination on it. Okay, but yeah, it bears repeating. Excellent build quality, excellent aesthetics. They look great. They're comfortable. Pride of ownership, all of that. I'm not going to show you because it's the same with every ZMF. You get that hard shell plastic. They call them seahorse cases. It's like a Samsonite kind of a thing, right? Really durable, looks good. Okay, you get pretty good stock cables that are, aren't amazing, but they are, as far as stock cables go, are on the better end of the spectrum compared to a lot of other headphone makers, in my opinion, on that. All right, so let's dive into the sound then. For test gear here, I primarily used either my Schiit Bifrost 2/64 or my Berkeley Alpha Series 2 DAC, which is fed by a Singer SU2 USB bridge. And then I also got in, during the course of this review, a Musician Draco DAC, which was used some. For amps, I tried my Vioelectric HPA V281 headphone amp, which specializes in driving high impedance headphones like this one. I used my KN HA1A Mark II tube amp. I used my Cord Hugo 2 DAC amp to drive these a little bit too, and then also for a time I had in here the linear tube audio Z10E big integrated speaker headphone electrostatic amp, which I'm working on a review for and hope to get to you in the not too distant future to drive these as well. Okay, so a pretty big range of quality pieces in there and all of that on the source gear. So getting into the signature, from a frequency response standpoint, you get that, I just call it ZMF warmth. If you're familiar with the sound of the Sennheiser HD650 or HD6XX, you get kind of that neutral, warm sort of presentation here, although I think these are a little bit warmer yet than the 650/6XX, like not to the point where it gets too thick or anything like that, but just a little bit warmer yet. This has a better bass extension. Like this one has a more linear bass extension all the way down deep, getting closer and closer to 20 hertz. It does not roll off as much as many dynamic driver headphones do, to my ear anyway. The treble presentation, there is, like, it's not necessarily dark, but it's also not really a focus of the sound here. There is good treble presence, but I wouldn't call it bright. I don't know that I would call this a dark sounding headphone, at least with the pheasant wood. but it's definitely more of a neutral, warm kind of tuning in there with, again, excellent bass extension all the way down pretty deep anyway. Okay, the tonal balance through the mid-range and the treble is also very good for my ears. Now, I'm a little bit sensitive in the 1 to 3 kilohertz region, so I like a little bit less energy in there, and so these matched my ears well to that. I think some people might find the mid presence here a little bit lacking, particularly if you like the house sound of like Odyssey or many focals. The mid-range here is going to feel a little bit recessed to you. Okay, but it works well for my ears. I never detected any shout or honk on here, which is important for me, so I never got any of the fatigue or anything like that that came along with having those traits in the sound there. I was also impressed with the physicality of the bass. There is good slam in the deep sub bass. There is a healthy amount of punch in the mid bass, all of that. It's also well controlled. There's some good rumble and all of that. Now, detail retrieval is kind of like the ZMF trait that we've heard of before. They are not the most resolving things that you are going to find at $2,500 up to $3,000, right? Depending on what options you get. You're going to get better resolution at the price point out there. Now, these are not poorly resolving. They are a step up from like the O-Tour and Icon level for ZMF in there. They might be a little bit more resolving yet than like a Hi-Fi Man Aria, but if they are, it's not by much. So there's good detail retrieval, but not amazing. The trade-off there is that the timbre, because of the tonal balance and because of the way Zach tunes the attack and decay and all of that, so those time domain aspects, you get some really rich, natural sounding timbre here, particularly in the lower half of the mid-range. They are, again, not necessarily dark, but leaning darker in their frequency response. So I think some of the upper mids, lower treble timbre isn't quite as strong as it could be, but the lower mid timbre, I think, is really, really excellent and just creates this really just lush, delicious almost kind of sound to it. So then let's talk about soundstage. It is somewhat wide, not necessarily tall. There's a little bit of depth, so a bit of width, not huge, but also not tiny or claustrophobic in any way. The imaging is fairly strong. You get a good sense of where sounds are within the sound field. The separation bit, again, and I think this is also like, I remember this about the ZMF Atrium and like the O-Tour and all that as well, is the separation of the sonic images is not particularly strong. It's not terrible, but you're going to find better at this price point. Okay, so that's a lot of the sonic traits. But let me say, like from a presentation standpoint, this particular set of ZMFs that I got on my head, like I enjoyed the O-Tour for what it was. The Icon was pretty good. I thought the Icon was a bit of a specialist, excelled in some genres of music, wasn't as strong elsewhere. I thought the O-Tour was a little bit more of a generalist than the Icon was, all that. And then the O-Tour had that kind of silky, warm, natural, lower mid timbre, similar to what this one does, that really kind of set it apart at its price range. Okay, but it wasn't like the most technically accurate thing. The Atrium, I think in some ways was a response to the Verite, because the Verite came first, where the Atrium has a little bit more upper mid presence and a little bit more treble presence, I think, going from memory. I was unfortunately not able to direct A-B them, but I remember those traits about the Atrium, and I talked about them in a review. One thing that's nice about being a reviewer is you can go back and look at what you said about a thing, and that helps you remember. Anyway, the Atrium was a little bit of a response to this, I think, in terms of bringing the mid-range presence, the upper mid presence up a little bit, giving you a little bit more treble energy and all that. So it has a little bit different signature. But even then, I thought the Atrium really specialized in like folk and like more mellow acoustic music, some jazz, and some like vocal harmonies and that sort of thing. But it had a little bit too much mid-range presence for hard rock, heavy metal, even classic rock, and those sorts of things. So it too was a bit of a specialist. This one is the first ZMF that has come along that I've gotten on my head where I really am starting to get it. And what I mean by getting it is ZMF has this reputation for not necessarily being the most technically excellent sonically, but having this like rich, warm, natural tonality and timbre qualities to them that no one else is really doing right now, particularly at these price points. And then, of course, they dress it up in one of the most beautiful packages with excellent craftsmanship that you can get your hands on. And so there's a big draw to them for those reasons. And so there are a lot of people out there that are like, okay, yeah, ZMF, not the most technically proficient headphone maker sonically, but there is just something that keeps you coming back for more. And this one, this particular Verite Open here, is where the light went on for me on all of that. All of those other headphones that I mentioned had their strengths. They were good. I don't think I would reach for them very often if they were in my own collection. This one I probably would, if I were able to hang on to it. Those sessions that I told you about where I was listening to them for hours while finishing up grading and all of that, it took me on musical journeys that I haven't been on for a while. Sus has done it to me. The HE1000 SE has done it to me. The Focal Utopias, both the original and the new, have done that to me a lot lately. But this one also did. Like, I thoroughly enjoyed listening to these. I did not find them fatiguing at all. Just the way they are tuned works really well for me, with that warm and the lushness and just that really natural lower mid timbre. They were able to play hard rock and aggressive heavy metal and all of that for, multiple hours while being on my head without getting fatiguing and all of that. So this one, yeah, I get it. Okay, so it's not the most technically proficient thing ever, particularly like in the resolution and the staging and all of that. So what? Sounds great. Okay, it's got really good bass extension too. It, like on Why So Serious by Hans Zimmer, that synthesized bass line about 3.5 minutes in, deep, powerful, accurate, okay, good pitch definition and well textured and all of that here, and then did a pretty good job of reproducing the space of the little snare drum sound that's happening at the same time on top of that. So I just really enjoyed listening to these. So thumbs up to Zach and the team at ZMF on this one. This one is causing me to get it. Okay, so going into comparisons, I've already done that a little bit with the Atrium there. We'll start with that since it's the same price. The Atrium, again, tuned with a little bit more upper mid and lower treble presence, which can be a bit too much and a bit too glary for my ears with like hard rock, heavy metal, and all of this. This worked well for all genres, but maybe not quite as well as the Atrium would work for jazz and other more acoustically oriented music in there too. Or if you like vocal harmonies, this won't pull those out quite as much there. But the Atrium got fatiguing to me for a lot of the music that I really like, hard rock, heavy metal, classic rock, those sorts of things, that this didn't do. This one also has better sub-bass presence and extension than the Atrium does, but the Atrium has a little bit more air up top. Their staging and overall detail retrieval and resolution are pretty equal though, I would say, between those two. What else do we have for open backs at $3,000 or $2,500 there? The HiFiMan HE1000 V2, another one of my favorites, is going to have basically, similar bass extension and rumble. It's going to have more treble energy, probably too much for some. And it still has pretty good timbre and has much bigger and more accurate spatial presentation than this one. But this one still has that lush fullness and natural sounding timbre, particularly through the lower mids again, that the HE1000 V2 isn't going to have if those are important to you. And the HE1000 V2 gets fatiguing because of its treble presence, elevated treble presence, that this one doesn't do to me. So that is another thing there. Comparison with the Verite closed, I'm going to beg for an incomplete and some patience on that one. When I get around to doing another review of those proper, I will do more direct comparison with the open. when I get there. So stay tuned for that. All right, so thanks again to Mr. Errett for loaning me the Verite Open here. I will get these back to you in the near future, I hope. Hope you let me hang on to them for just a little bit longer so I can do fair AB with this African Blackwood Verite close that I have here. But then otherwise, like, it just, yeah, I do like this one, and it's helping me get the attraction to ZMF more than I had gotten it previously. So well done, Zach and the team at ZMF. I really enjoyed this one. So I will leave it there. Please check out my PayPal if you haven't, my Patreon if you haven't. Give me a like and a subscription and leave a comment below and all of those things. Thank you for watching. I am Wave Theory. This has been my review of the ZMF Verite Open. Enjoy the music.